Hello and welcome to the Expansion Room. I'm your host, Shervon Laurice, psychospiritual guide and coach. And if you're new to the experience of the Expansion Room, I want to give you a wholehearted welcome. Welcome to the space, welcome to this energy and frequency. And if you are returning to the Expansion Room, returning to this journey, welcome back. This is the relaunch to the Expansion Room. It is now the very beginning of January 2026, and we are moving in a different frequency and in a different rhythm with this podcast. You will notice if you're returning that the layout is a little bit different. We won't have the broken up segments with the commercial breaks as we did on our previous platform. And so we will run all the way through. And there will be times that I have guests, and there will be times like today, there will be solo episodes. And so I am hoping that if you are returning, you will see and feel the shift to a more spiritually embodied program and offering, still connecting to mental health and emotional well-being, still connecting to the practices of mindfulness and yoga philosophy, as well as broad spaces of spirituality in this podcast. But we're going to take this podcast out into the world in a whole new frequency and energy. Looking at this year, for me, embodied expansion, right? How do I, as an individual and business owner, and someone who is putting content out into the world, how do I embody the kind of expansion I want to have in the world, the kind of impact I want to have in the world, and how do we bring that into this space? So, welcome, welcome, welcome. And welcome to 2026. So today's relaunch episode is entitled The Power of Embodied Decision, right? Why clarity follows commitment and not certainty. We are taught, I believe, many of us, that in order to make a good decision, a proper decision, that we have to be certain about the decision that we make. Not that decision itself is the empowering piece. That decision itself then helps to bring about clarity, right? When we can make a decision, we then are able to commit to an identity and a path forward. And oftentimes we stall. We find ourselves in a place of procrastination, or maybe in a place of trying to be perfect, right? Certainty. And we don't actually take action to move forward with something that we're really saying that we want to do, whether that's in business or in our personal lives. And so, unfortunately, there are a lot of dreams and ideas out there that never actually we don't get to see come into fruition. And what I am hoping that this podcast, as well as my work continues to do in the world, is to help people get to a place where they see their impact in the world, how it expands either in their work or in their relationships with people, in their families, and how they have that greater impact and how it starts from decision, right? So what we often say when we talk about the Expansion Room, and the Expansion Room is a podcast as well as an online community through the Circle platform. So feel free to look up, if you go to the Circle platform, the Expansion Room, because we have these kinds of conversations in that space as well. But when we think about the expansion room and the work that I do in the world, I always add on where inner work meets impact, because we want to have impact in the world. We want to feel like we have purpose and that we are energetically changing things in the world for the good, right? So to have that impact, we have to do the inner work. And doing the inner work starts with decision, right? And so decision can be the most powerful thing that we possess, because it's part of really coming to a place where we step into the desire of our lives, where we step into the vision of how we want to live our lives, our lifestyle. And so if you can get good with making decisions, even if they're not perfect, that is going to naturally change your life. So with this being the threshold of a new year, stepping deeper into the essence of this kind of work that we offer in the world, making even a deeper commitment to you, to the people that we work with in my business. The whole idea is to broaden, to expand. It's to see ourselves in a new way, in a new light, in a new identity. What you'll notice with this program moving forward is that, as I said, we're stepping more into embodied spirituality and identity evolution, and having a more lived experience of transformation in this space, in my life, in the work I do in the world. But I'm going to invite you in to do the same. All right? I want to take as many of you with me in that space of identity evolution and life transformation as possible. And so I hope that you become not just a consumer of the podcast, but a person who embodies this podcast in a way, or the information rather that you get in this podcast in a way that starts to transform your life in a foundational way, right? At the heart of every decision is a desire. And so I will invite you to really tune into what are your desires, especially for 2026 and as we're moving forward into this year. And so for now, let's start with the power of embodied decision, not decision as force, right? Not decision as pressure. There are way too many of us living our lives from a space of having to, right? I have to do this. I have to do that. Or I feel an obligation to do such and such and such. And so I'm not talking about making decision from a place of pressure, force, or obligation. Not even from a space of mental certainty. But what I'm talking about is decision that is made as frequency. When we are able to tune inward and really figure out what it is that we want, even in that, just that moment, and then maybe tune into our choices, right? And then make a decision. The moment when our bodies and our nervous system and our souls come into alignment, it is often then that a decision is born. And in our day-to-day lives of doing things because we have to, there's not always, and most often not always, alignment. right? We are making this decisions because our mind is telling us, oh, we have to do this, but our hearts are not in it, right? Our central nervous system is kind of going haywire, signaling to us that our hearts are not in it. But here we are, making a decision, sometimes against our better judgment, to do something that we don't really want to do, we're not really committed to doing. So this episode is not about convincing you to make a choice. It's about helping you to recognize the choices you already have available to you, right? And that you've maybe been postponing or negotiating or holding back on because you feel like, I don't want to make a decision because I don't want to make the wrong decision. One of the things that I've learned as a person who's been in business for over 2 decades and from other business owners is that decisions have to be made, and we can't always make decisions in real time from certainty. Decisions have to be made, and they enable us to learn as we go. If we make a decision today and find out 2 days from now, 2 weeks from now, 2 months from now, that was quote unquote the wrong decision, we can then stop, make an assessment, and choose to make a new decision based on the new information. And so that's where we start with this idea of making a decision that is something that we can commit to, even if we're not in a space of certainty. Know that decision making is not always logical, right? As we're taught, we should have this idea of clarity and logic and certainty, but that is not always where we are. We are taught to gather information. We are in an information age, y'all, right? I'm in my 50s, and to see the evolution of how we can get information so that we can make decisions has been amazing. When I was a little kid, I loved the library. I had a library card, and it felt like I could go anywhere in my mind because I had a love of reading books. And I used to love flipping through encyclopedias. And so, of course, at the library, they had shelves and shelves and shelves of Encyclopedia Britannica. And whenever there was an update, they'd get in new ones, right? This was how I used to get information, besides the books that were assigned to us at school, and sometimes getting that information too from parents and our community at large, right? If you were a person who grew up in a religious community, you got information from there, besides school, as well as from your neighborhood and community, the adults, as well as your peers. We have evolved into the age of having computers, laptops, particularly in our homes. The internet has come along and given us information, right? When I first began to engage in the internet, they had something called Jeeves, Ask Jeeves, before we had Google. And that's how we got information, right? We would ask questions through Jeeves. Nowadays, we actually use Google quite a bit, and we've moved into the use of social media over this last decade. And that's where a lot of us get information. So between the internet and social media, we have information overload. And now in the last couple of years, we are all gaining access to AI through ChatGPT. And so there's so much information that we have sometimes just coming at us, where we have to then decipher, Is this true? Is this real, quote unquote? Is this for me? Or do we have to push that all aside? And what I encourage people to do in this huge information age is, yes, we have information. We have to weigh our options. And we should also tap into intuition, our God-given, universe-given sixth sense, that gut instinct, that other way that we listen, right? The other way that we decipher. We have abandoned that in a lot of ways for information outside of ourselves. And very oftentimes we are trained out of listening for our inner voice, listening and tuning into our intuition. It is really a difference, and a lot of people don't, of course, use this terminology, but I've seen it and how it plays out in the world. Information outside of ourselves, especially if it's like research-based or from a doctor or from an authority that has a lot of letters behind their names, we take that as proof in a lot of ways to help us make our decision, which is a very masculine approach. Instead of tuning in, quietly listening to our own inner voice, our gut instinct, our intuition, which is a more feminine voice. I want to encourage you, I want to encourage the world to have a balance, right? To, yes, know what the concrete research base or whatever based idea is of information in whatever field or in whatever part of your life that you're looking. Know what that is, and then ask yourself inwardly, what does my own inner voice say about this? Right? It is not how real things change, how real transformation comes or happens for us when we look outside of ourselves. We have to get to a place where we actually use both our outside ears and eyes and our inside ears and eyes to make transformation stick, to make transformation happen. Decision is rarely logical, trust me on this one, when it matters most. Sometimes it's really about tuning into that gut instinct. If it were, most people would already be living the aligned lives that they really want to live. The mind is designed to keep you safe, not expand it. Right? So when we look outside of ourselves in the logical, linear ways that we've all been trained, right? I was trained as a psychotherapist. I was trained to look at theories, to look at the research. One of the favorite terms in my industry is evidence-based. Is it evidence-based? Whatever work you're doing with a client or patient, is it evidence-based? And while, yes, we need that, sometimes intuition has to be part of the conversation, has to be part of the decision making. And in business, I've noticed I have to allow my intuition to come to the surface when making decisions. Doesn't always look like what we call proof that scans for risks and references the past, right? Because we look at the past for evidence. And sometimes there is no real evidence there that we can use in order to make a decision. Sometimes things are so fresh, so new, and there's no reference that we can go back on. So you might have all the information that you need, that you think you need, but you might have to make an intuitive choice. Embodied decision does not begin in the mind. It begins in sensations that we have in our bodies, right? That intuition way of listening to your inner voice is going to take you inside. What sensations do you notice come up for you when a decision needs to be made? Is there tension in the body? Is there a sense of longing in your body? Do you feel the sensation in your heart center? Do you feel a sensation in your gut? Do you feel it moving throughout your entire body? Do you tend to get a little bit more antsy, or does your body, when you turn inward, settle and give you that bit of silence so that you can step into that still small voice and hear what needs to be heard? In the quiet knowing that something is no longer sustainable, that's where decisions become born, right? It's this sense of knowing. I'll never forget when I was still working full-time. I had a part-time private practice at the time. I was probably working maybe 8 or 10 hours a week, seeing clients, and I had a full-time job in the federal government. And there was a year, and I believe it was 2012, when I started to hear in the back of my mind, and at first I ignored it because I was a person who was raised that you get an education, you find a stable job, and you work that job till retirement. And there was these days where I started to realize I was hearing in the back of my mind that this was not where I needed to be any longer. I had been there about, at least at that point, 7 years. And that there was a shift coming, something major. And I kind of was ignoring it for a while until something happened in the office itself with the people I was working with that made me snap into this space of needing to listen inwardly to what was coming up. And when I paused long enough to listen inwardly, to hear what my inner voice was trying to say, the tension that I was experiencing in my body, even just waking up to go to work every day, which I had never been a person who woke up every day and go, oh, I gotta go to work. But it had started to become that. And when I really listened and made the decision, there was a sense of ease. I felt light. I felt like I was being moved in a direction or allowing myself to go down the path of my own choices, of my own expansion, and no longer dimming my light and making myself small by staying somewhere that I had outgrown. Now, it's funny, when I made that decision, it was 2012. I believe it was fall, like somewhere around early September, late September of that year. And I didn't immediately leave, but I did start making decisions and taking action towards me leaving that job. And it only took a year. I built up my business to a point where I couldn't do more without having left that job. And when I was ready to step out, I made a decision and set a date and resigned from that position. And it was a powerful moment for me leaving on my last day. That sense of lightness. Yes, there was a little hint of, ooh, this is big. This is a shift. I don't know what I'm getting into, but I felt like it was the right direction for me to go. And that was fall of 2013. And here we are now, 13 years later. I do not regret that decision, but I will tell you, I was not certain, right? I did not have, all the data that says this is going to work and it's going to work for you if you do this in these steps. Didn't know any of that. I had a very loose plan. I did not have certainty, but I was committed to the decision. And so you may not have a full plan. You may not see the entire path rolled out before you, but your body already knows when something is complete. Your body already knows when something is complete. Are you resisting what your body already knows? When you ignore what you know, your body tightens. Your body has tension. Your body has a little bit more stress than it needs to. Your nervous system stays braced, right? We talk about fight, flight, or freeze in the sympathetic nervous system. And it is harder to step into relaxed, rest, and digest of our parasympathetic nervous system. And when we don't make the decisions that allow our bodies to be at ease, we create stagnation, a sense of being stuck, right? Decision in this way is an act of listening. It is an act of listening inward, because everything that you want, need, and desire already exists. It is up to us to pause, turn inward, and listen for our own truth. Listen to our own intuition so that we know the next step, the next decision, the next iteration of our identity that we need to step into, even if we're not certain, right? It is our truth. So ask yourself right now, where have I been waiting for certainty before I allow myself to choose? Just sit with that for a second. We're at the top of a new year. People make resolutions, right? Is this the year that you step into your new business? Is this the year that you go for that leadership role that you suspect that you're good at and can do? Is this the year that you let go of old relationships that no longer serve you so that you can step into the kinds of relationships and connections that really help you to expand and grow? Is this the year? What have you been allowing yourself to hold back? So let's go back to this idea that decision is frequency, right? It is frequency vibration. It is a frequency that you begin to live the moment you make the decision. So whatever decision you're making, right? It can be small ones, right? It can be big ones. Small ones can be, I get up today and I decide to drive a different route to a place that I normally go, or go to a different coffee shop, or take a walk in a different route, because you just never know what happens. It could be a bigger decision like the one I made in 2012 when I decided to leave, as they would say, my good government job. Is that the decision for you? A shift in how and where and who you might work for. When you decide to make a decision, when you decide from an embodied place, and when I say that, embodied place, it means you have paused and turned inward to make that decision. It is not based on an outward piece of information alone. Your energy completely reorganizes. Your posture shifts, your breath changes, your energy changes. And I also have experienced the fact that your attention shifts. It sharpens, because now that you've made a decision, you've gone from everything out here and having all these options to focused attention. And everything that does not align with that decision falls away, because you are now focused on what it is that you have decided. And that is where your attention goes. I love the saying, energy flows where attention goes. And that is part of embodied decision making. And when we make a decision, especially a big change, right? Nothing may change immediately on the outside. Like, you may not see external shifts on the outside, but internally, know that everything is already different, because you've made a decision that you have now become committed to. This is why decision creates momentum long before results appear. And your nervous system begins to reorient itself toward the possibility rather than around protecting you, right? Our central nervous system, in a lot of ways, is designed to keep us protected. When we make a decision, we realign or reorient around that decision, because that new decision brings about so many more possibilities. And when we can reorient in that way, again, that allows energy to move us forward. That frequency shift in our central nervous system, in our energetic field, allows us to move forward towards the goal of that decision we've made. And your body starts to release what no longer fits, what no longer serves. As your attention is on what you've now made a decision for, you cannot then also maintain attention on the things that no longer serve you, that no longer fit this paradigm, this idea, this identity that you've now committed to. Your identity loosens its grip on old roles and old stories, right? One of the things that, I've realized with most people, we weave stories around our life experiences, especially from childhood. And I had created a story, as many of us have, based on my childhood experience of growing up with a single mom, I had two younger brothers, and not always having the financial means for the things that we wanted. We had the basics of what we needed to in our lives, but not a lot of extra. And I had woven a story for myself that since I had grown up poor, that there was going to be somehow a cap as to where I could get to in life. And when I got to that cap, I was like, okay, great. I made it. And then that was it. I kind of stayed in that range for a really long time. I'll give you an example. I started my private practice as a psychotherapist almost immediately upon finishing my degree and becoming licensed. And what was funny was I had this thought, oh, I will work this part-time practice alongside my full-time job until I'm ready to retire from my full-time job. And then I would just do this part-time practice until, whenever. That was the dream. And I got there and realized after some years of doing that I needed to make the shift. That was in 2012 to full-time practice owner and full-time therapist. And then I did that for 10 years, 10 more years, building out my practice, thinking that was all there is. That was all there was going to be that I was going to be doing. And then I got to that 10-year mark of just doing that and realized, holy cow, I've been living small. And I've been happy to be sequestered in this little room, meeting with people one-on-one and not thinking in a much larger or much more expansive way. That's when I allowed myself to kind of expand even out of that original idea. But it took a decision, and it took me letting go of the story of limitation that I had weaved for myself. I had to let go of this idea of, I'm going to get to this place and that'll be great. Because when I stepped into the decision of expansion, there was so much more that I could focus on and give to the world, offer to the world, and a shift in my own life was able to therefore happen. This is why half decisions feel exhausting. They split your energy. So in a lot of ways, I was making a half decision. I had partially moved forward when I left my full-time job to step into full-time practice work. But I had not let go of the old story, the old narrative. So in a lot of ways, it was just a partial decision. Part of me had moved forward, but not all of me had stepped into the place that I am in now. So when you make decisions, are you stepping fully into a decision? Are you still bracing yourself or doubting yourself or holding on to old narratives, old ways of being, old comfort spots that are actually limiting your expansion? Embodied decision is clean. It is clear. It is not dramatic. It is, however, settled. It sounds like this is no longer who I am. This is the direction I am choosing to live from. That's what it sounds like. I do not need to know the how yet. You just make the decision clean and clear without knowing the certainty of the how. All right? So when I made the original decision to leave my full-time job, I had already, in some ways, created a new narrative of the how. This is how you build a private practice into full-time, because I had that model laid out for me from other therapists who had done it. Not realizing that my reach in the world could be so much more expanded in working with people who were not my one-on-one clients, right? But we got there eventually. The decision shifted yet again, and I stepped into a more expanded version of myself. So if you feel tired, exhausted where you are, if you feel stuck or maybe even restless, right? There's this kind of feeling that arises of restlessness that people always, when they describe it, they're like, they can't pinpoint what's wrong, right? Because outwardly, you have success. I had a successful full-time private practice. I was fully able to take care of myself and live the life that I wanted to live at that time. And so on the outside looking in, everything was fine, but there was a restlessness or a sense of feeling stuck. It is often not because you are lacking in clarity. It is because you have not fully decided, and your body knows it. It always knows. So decision making is also identity shifting or identity evolution. Every true decision that we make requires an identity shift because we are holding on to stories that we weave to say who we are in the world. And in doing so, that just narrows our identity in the world, what we will and will not do, or what we do and do not do. We cannot carry an old identity into a new chapter of our lives and expect that there's going to be coherence. That brings about misalignment. This is where most people get caught up. They want change without becoming the someone new that can hold that change. And so becoming is not about self-improvement, right? It is an unveiling, much like a sculptor when he has a piece of clay, he or she has a piece of clay or marble or wood, and to the rest of us, it's just a block. They can see something in it, something beautiful that needs to emerge. And what they do is they chip away at what does not need to be there to reveal the beauty of what's underneath, right? And so when we make embodied decisions, we are not just choosing an outcome, we are choosing who we are willing to be to have that outcome expressed in the world. The version of you who delays or over prepares, I'm guilty of that one, and the version of you who stays small and stays safe has to step aside. Those versions of you cannot come forward into your new identity when you decide. This is why decision often brings grief. You have to release what feels familiar around this, whatever the this is that you're making a decision about. You are letting go of a self that once actually served you well, once actually protected you. This version of yourself got you to where you are today. So we can't knock it necessarily, but if there's something lurking, right, in the back of your mind that you know that you want to do, should be doing, that identity of you that would have a greater impact in the world, but you've been kind of procrastinating on it, that version of you looking forward cannot bring the old version of you along for this ride, right? You've got to let that old version of you go. And grief does not mean that you are making the wrong choice. When you have to let go of your old self and you kind of grieve some of that, it is not because you're making a wrong choice here in the matter. It just means something mattered to you, right? That part of you who carried you thus far to this place mattered, right? You built that identity and it got you here. The identity that I built so that I could come out of childhood poverty, get educated, work, build a career, and then start my own practice, which then started my own business, was just like everything. Even as a small child, I could not have imagined getting to that place. But I got there by building that identity. But that person could not bring me to where I am today and where I see myself going. So if you're standing at the threshold right now, ask yourself, who am I no longer willing to be in order to step forward into the life that I envision? Right? So this brings me to practicing embodied decision making. How do we do that? Right? Because we're not taught how to, in our upbringings or even in our early careers, how to make decisions in ways that feel embodied or from an embodied place. So let's bring this into the body. Pause where you are, take a seat if you're not already sitting, and take a moment to notice your breath. Just notice. That is the moment where you start to turn inward. When you can pause from the doing, from the talking, from even using your senses to look at things, to hear, and you turn inward and you just notice your breath. Now bring to mind a decision that you have been circling around. Could be a big one, could be a small one. Right? You've been quietly returning to that decision, but not really making a decision. Notice what happens in your body as you hold it gently in your awareness. Where in your body do you feel it? Where in your body do you feel expansion? And where do you feel contraction? Just notice. Embodied decision does not override the body. It listens. So ask yourself, if I trusted my body's wisdom, what direction is already clear to me? Decision does not require urgency. It only requires honesty. And when you are ready to allow yourself to inwardly state, I choose alignment over delay, or I choose to live from what is true now, that can shift things. So let your body register for you right now the choice. And just notice how you feel. Place a hand on your heart here, and as you breathe slowly, silently repeat to yourself, I choose my inner knowing. I move forward in alignment. Allow your body to soften around this truth. And give yourself permission. I want to invite you to give yourself permission to make these kinds of decisions from this space, this inner focus, rather than from pressure or misalignment, stress, right? Or something else outside of yourself. When a decision needs to be made, take a pause, turn your attention inward, connecting to your breath, and then decide. Seeing what your choices are, then decide. So this episode marks the beginning of a new chapter for us here at the Expansion Room. And so moving forward in this space, we will continue to explore embodiment, conscious leadership, spiritual leadership, identity evolution, and the inner architecture of transformation. So if this episode resonated for you, I invite you to stay with me in this space. Like and subscribe whichever platforms that you're on, and hit the notification key so that you can be notified whenever we upload another episode. I thank you for being here. I thank you for sharing this time with me. And if you feel like someone else in your life might benefit from hearing an episode of The Expansion Room, I invite you to share it with them. And remember that clarity follows decision. Alignment follows embodiment. And that your next level becomes the moment that you choose it. Thank you for being here, and I'll see you in the next episode of The Expansion Room.